Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this flaskup.com Mr. Pandaria raiding guide. And in this video we're going to be taking a look at the normal mode version of Malkorok in the new Siege of Orgrimmar raid. Now in order to complete this fight we took 2 tanks, 2 healers due to DPS constraints for this fight, and then the remaining a mixture of both melee and ranged DPS. Now this is a 2-phase fight, and first of all it's worth noting that one of the main abilities for this fight is called Ancient Miasma, and when you start the fight this Ancient Miasma will fill the room and it will place a buff on every player that will cause them to absorb healing taken. So yay, it's that fun little nugget again. If you remember back to Tortos Heroic in the Throne of Thunder, it kind of works exactly the same way as the shields in that. Now this barrier that gets put on players will absorb healing up to a cap of 100% of that player's maximum health, and in addition the miasma will also inflict 30,000 shadow damage to the player every 2 seconds. Now during phase 1 of this fight, Malkorok has several abilities that are fairly easy to deal with, however they will require your healers to make sure you are topped up and that your barriers are also topped up as well. At the very start of the fight, it may be worth grouping up for a very short period of time to AoE heal in order to build up the barriers before the fight actually properly begins. Now in the first phase, which is called Might of the Carchron, Malkorok's first ability is called Arcing Smash, and this will cause him to face a random player and unleash an overhead attack which will inflict 600,000 physical damage to anyone that's within a 40-yard cone in front of him. Now as you can probably see in the video in the background, we're placing markers where this is occurring, because he will use this same location later on in the fight in order to channel the power of Yasharj, is it? I don't know how to pronounce that, that's very bad on my part, and it will cause the areas that have been hit by Arcing Smash to explode, inflicting 1.2 million shadow damage to anyone that's in those areas. So once he's cast Arcing Smash in an area, don't go back into it until you see purple breath has gone through it, and then the area around him kind of resets and he'll do 3 more Arcing Smashes and then do the breath again. Another ability you'll have to put up with is called Seismic Slam, and this will cause him to slam the ground, inflicting 500,000 physical damage in a 5-yard radius around a random player. Now this is the main reason you need to stay spread out, and it's also why I said you can only stay stacked up for a short amount of time at the start of the fight if you want AoE heal. This ability will knock anyone up in the air who does get hit by it, and as I've said, make sure you are spread out so that people aren't actually getting hit by it, as it's unnecessary damage. Now during this phase your tanks will also have to deal with a tank switch, and this is due to an ability called Fatal Strike, and these strikes will increase the tank's damage taken by 10% per stack for 30 seconds. This is obviously gear dependent how many stacks you take, but as we're able to take up to around 10, 11, 12 stacks before they actually switched. The final ability that you'll have to deal with during this phase is called Imploding Energy, and as you can see there are these little void zones that are spawning around the room, and these are called Tears of Dark Energy. Now these will explode after 4 seconds and deal a high amount of shadow damage to anyone that is within 5 yards. However, if no players are within 5 yards, the tear will instead inflict 510,000 shadow damage to everyone in the raid. So you need to make sure that someone goes and stands within the tear and that the healers have topped them up enough so that they aren't going to lose their barrier. Now, you should also note that he has another ability that's constant throughout both phases, and this is called Eradicate, and if Malkorok isn't dead within 6 minutes, he will pretty much one-shot your raid, if you think back to Ultraxion and his strict enrage timer. So this fight does have a substantial DPS check in order to meet the 6-minute enrage. Now what you'll also notice is that Malkorok has got a rage bar, and when his rage bar reaches 100 rage, he will enter a blood rage. Now this will cause him to melee swing in a frontal cone in front of him for 1.8 million physical damage. However, this damage is split among every enemy that is hit, So as soon as he hits 100 rage, you want everyone to stack up in front of the boss on top of your tanks, and you need to start AoE healing because he casts this on a very regular basis. Now when he enters his blood rage, he will also absorb the ancient miasma that is in the room, so you will no longer have the protective barriers on you. But when the blood rage ends, he will expel the ancient miasma and it will be reapplied to players. Now during this phase he will also cast an ability called Displaced Energy, and while he's in a blood rage, energy will randomly arc off of his body and hit players with displaced energy. Now this is a debuff that's placed and it's dispellable, and it will be placed on a player for 9 seconds and deal 250,000 shadow damage every 3 seconds. Now when displaced energy expires or is dispelled, the energy will explode outwards and inflict 450,000 shadow damage to anyone that is within 8 yards. So what you need to do for this is when anyone gets the displaced energy debuff on them, they need to simply move out of the raid and then call for a dispel and then move back into the raid. If you think Jin Rock Heroic, it's kind of like ionization on that. Finally, when his blood rage expires, Malkorok will gain a stack of Relentless Assault, which will increase all his damage dealt by 25%, and this affects stacks. Now as the fight goes on, because of this Relentless Assault debuff, and depending on how many blood rages you go through, you may want to consider more options such as not letting your tanks take as many stacks of the debuff, or anything along those lines. It's just the little things that you need to look out for. So that's going to do it for this Mr. Pandaria raiding guide, and while this boss doesn't have many abilities, the fight is very healer intensive and, as I've said several times, does have a strict DPS check on it. If you'd like to view a written version of this guide, then you can head on over to flaskup.com or click on the link that's in the video description below. Alternatively, if you'd like to view any of our other normal mode guides, then please feel free to click on the annotations that are currently on screen now. As always, thank you for watching, and if you are interested in future Mr. Pandaria raiding guides, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel.